It's the summer of love in France. What we saw happen here in America, the fiery but mostly peaceful protest, seems to be recreating itself for the French. You see, this is an image of just one set of burning buildings and cars on display on the streets out and around Paris. This is what the map looks like. Lots of rioting taking place. We're going to go through the backstory here. Why is this happening? Apparently, there was a 17-year-old man who was shot and killed by a French police officer. And so that triggered a bunch of people to go really rebalance justice in society by looting stores and burning buildings down, as we saw happen here in America. And so here is a quick montage of exactly what this looks like on the streets of France. That's going to bring some harmony now to society. That's a bigot's car. That's a racist car. Those cars were responsible for discrimination. So that building, now that this building is on fire, we're going to have more equality in our society now. So things are getting much better in France now that this equitable movement is underway. You can see also, in order to rebalance the injustices in society, we have to extract property and cars from this building, which will resolve a lot for us. Nice. Justice. Yes, baby. Down with the patriarchy. All right, we're getting equality in France now. Don't know what's in that building. We need to go further. We need more justice. More justice. Get in there for that justice. Perfect. Get that equality out of that building, man. One more time. One more time. All right, get in there. Yeah. All right, get in there and get that equality. All right. So here is another real important thing that happened. Very important to burn down the libraries, because the libraries have things like books in them, and books contains things like knowledge and truth. And, you know, a lot of patriarchs and white guys wrote a lot of those books. So 830 years after 9 million books in Nalanda were burnt by Islamists, the largest public library in the city of Marseille in France has been set on fire. The largest public library in France, Marseille. Knowledge is everything, but the villains know better. That's why they delete this stuff. And you know what's so funny about this one is this guy actually posted his, I think, Snapchat for everybody to see. That's how proud they are. So libraries are racist and bigoted, so they gotta go. Burn those books down. So that's what's going on in France. Very progressive. Definitely not going to happen here again. You see, the police are having a difficult time responding to all of this. Marseille is how you say it. Sorry, I'm not French. Marseille is the city that was burning down. This is the police traveling around the streets of France. Looks like a scene out of a movie. So we have the streets now like Mad Max on display. Here are thousands or hundreds of cops all charging the protesters. Look at those people. It's almost like an insurrection's happening or something, but except this one's like real. And boy, could you imagine if this was happening on the streets of Moscow? If the Wagner group was over there engaged in this in Russia, what the media would be saying about this? But this is what Paris looks like. This is right outside of Paris. Okay, this is in a supposedly developed country that is definitely sophisticated and basically the path that our government wants to take us on. Here is what it looked like the following morning as this gentleman was traveling around. That's the streets in the aftermath. Yeah, not real great. Just everything is torched. One street after another. In France. And for what? This is going to bring equality or something? This is going to rebuild society by torching society? Okay, well, what the heck happened here? We're going to listen to some response. The timeline is interesting. Over from France24.com, we have an interesting development. Let's go through and break down what's been happening over the last few days. Starting here, 3:10 p.m. Here's what we see. Look at the scene here. This car is just torched. A vehicle burns during clashes between protesters. A 17-year-old boy was fatally shot by French police in a Paris suburb of Nanterre, June 29th. So then everybody started rioting. 40,000 police officers deployed across France. 4 times the number that were mobilized just on Wednesday. Few signs the government appeals are going to be de-escalating violence. There's a working class town called Nanterre, western outskirts. There was a boy named Nahil M. Nahil M. No last name because he's underage, 17 years old, shot dead on Tuesday. After that happened, protesters torched cars, barricaded streets, hurled projectiles at police following a peaceful vigil. Protesters scrawled vengeance for Nahil across buildings, and as the night set a bank that was lit on fire before firefighters put it out. A Nike shoe store was broken into. Lot of racism in there that needed to be equalized. 14 people were arrested on that one. 16 more were arrested with stolen objects after store windows were smashed. National police said on Thursday night officers faced new incidents in Marseille and Lyon and Pau and Toulouse and Lille, including fireworks and fires. It got worse. Here's the scene. 421 people were arrested nationwide.
According to Le Figaro newspaper, there have been so far 421 arrests nationwide, more than half of them in the Paris region, with the majority aged between 14 and 18. This follows the Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin, who announced earlier the quadrupling of the number of security forces in the streets to 40,000. Bus and tram services in the Paris area, meanwhile, were shut down before sunset to protect commuters and drivers alike, while in some suburbs, an overnight curfew has been announced.
Looks like total warfare out there. So at 7:12, Macron was holding crisis meetings after a third straight night of violence. He's going to cut short a trip to Brussels to chair the meeting, second in many days, Élysée said. Now the numbers were up to 667 people were arrested. Wow, they arrest their rioters, though? A total of 667 people were arrested, according to the Interior Minister. Here's some more scenery of blown out windows. That's the Nike store. Hopefully that righted a lot of the historical inequities and the police violence. Hopefully those shoes will help future police attacks. So that's public buildings, shopping centers were the targets of the attacks, including a city building. A police station was hit with a Molotov cocktail. I wonder if Kamala Harris is going to post a bail notice about that one on her Twitter account. According to regional authorities, an elementary school and a district office was also set on fire. In Marseille, a library was vandalized, according to local officials. Scuffles broke out, tear gas dispersed a group. Multiple public buildings were also targeted. In Drancy, rioters used a truck to force open the entrance of a shopping center, which was then looted and burned. Firefighters in the municipality dashed from blaze to blaze, and there were tensions all over the place for a long time. Here, 8:57, more looting, third night of violent unrest. And then finally, the French Prime Minister, Elizabeth Borne, said on Friday she had gathered ministers at her office to discuss the third night, calling it unbearable, inexcusable. Macron is returning, cutting his trip short to speak about it. He's back in France. Now Elizabeth Borne, the Prime Minister, says all options are on the table, including a state of emergency. Says we're looking at all options now, with one priority, restoring order throughout the country. Then, now, the UN is speaking out. Here we go. Deep racism in law enforcement. Ravina Shamdasani says this is a moment for the country to seriously address the deep issues of racism. We also emphasize the importance for peaceable assembly. We call on authorities to ensure the use of force by police is done proportionally. Yeah, so the police, make sure you don't hurt any of the people who are torching your city, literally burning your city to the ground. Be nice to them. Don't be racist to them. Paris transport disrupted after 12 buses were destroyed. That's nice. A public transport in Paris was disrupted on Friday after protesters, angered by the killing, destroyed a dozen buses. Probably, were those police buses or just no, probably not. There was very significant damage, but nobody was hurt. On Friday morning, 23 bus lines were out of a total of 350 in the city. Residents expect more of the same after the third night, which is not good. It's the weekend now. French city of Marseille bans protests this Friday. Marseille has decided to ban public demonstrations this Friday after last night's violence. All public transport in Marseille is going to stop from 7 p.m. local time today. Now we're up to 875 people arrested, 492 buildings damaged, 2,000 vehicles burned, 3,800 fires started, according to Macron. Paris is now halting buses and tram services, all stopped until 9 p.m. The early shutdown was for passenger safety. And then Macron speaks. He said on Friday that additional security forces would be deployed to contain the unrest in the wake of the killing of Nahil. Addressing a crisis meeting of ministers, he said additional means would be mobilized by the Interior Ministry to deal with the violence, denouncing the unacceptable exploitation of a death of an adolescent. He also called on parents, keep your kids off the streets during these riots, and he called on social media outlets to remove sensitive rioting content, whatever that is. So they want more censorship. I wonder if they're going to do like Trudeau did, that little dictator in Canada, and start cutting off bank accounts and stuff. We'll see. Although those were white protesters, so we'll see. UK warns citizens traveling to France about unrest. Certainly looks that way. Here is what Macron said.
Going to actually go to the French president now. He is speaking and addressing the violence happening in France.
Some people are trying to exploit this opportunity to attack our institutions. They have a huge responsibility, and I fully blame this violence, this unjustifiable violence. Faced with this, on the whole of France, our response was adjusted, people with a lot of cool responded. Now, this afternoon we took a number of measures with the various departments. The Interior Minister will have to mobilize more resources, and we deploy additional resources for the minister, and there will be a number of circular statements.
All right, so that's Macron. He says social media platforms should help tame violence. He says TikTok and Snapchat are being used to help rioters organize themselves, and it contributes to the mimicking behavior by some young people, right? So other kids are seeing other kids do this, and then they go out and they do it. They repeated what they saw online. He says it sometimes feels like some of them relive in the streets the video games that have intoxicated them. It's about video games too. Video games and TikTok. So France says that they're going to be restricting public transport. They're also cutting off fireworks sales, saying bus and tram services nationwide halt on Friday. Sales of large fireworks would be banned. The statement said that regional prefects who are in charge of security around the country would also be asked to ban the sale and transport of petrol cans, acids, and other inflammable liquids. So they're gearing up. Poverty is also to blame. France says gendarmes to use armored vehicles now against the riots. The gendarmerie, which I guess is a French word, I'm sure I'm butchering that one too. Prime Minister Borne said Friday, after 3 nights of violence following a deadly shooting, says additional mobile forces are now being launched, including we're canceling large-scale events and other things. France rejects the UN. The UN says your police are racist. They say no, they're not. Any accusation of racism or systemic discrimination in the police force is totally unfounded from the UN. And now a man dies. Some man jumped out of a building, died last night. Rest in peace. So you see, it's pretty messy over there. And what's so funny is we finally heard from Macron, but that's after some time elapsed. Macron was previously dancing the night away to Elton John. Here's what it looked like when he was getting his groove on. Just a little shimmy. Just a little bit of a shimmy. Meanwhile, justice is being served on Nike stores. Not looking good. But Elton John, he delivers a good show, I'm sure. So that was Macron. That's what's happening in France, and it is troubling. It doesn't look all that different from something that our country experienced in 2020 and may very well likely experience again, because as the Democrats and as a lot of the Republicans too, our power officials, the people in charge, they love to just hit everybody in the lower class, which is everybody except them, against one another. Why we have endless battles with each other over all sorts of things. We're now down to even pronouns now. That's how minute we have come with our divisions in our society. And so it's happening in France. It's very possible that it could happen here in the United States again, maybe even to a bigger extent like this is, especially on the back of Supreme Court rulings, as the wealth gap continues to increase, as the middle class continues to get obliterated. We're now going to see what I believe to be class warfare come back into play, along with gender warfare, along with orientation warfare, along with racial warfare and religious warfare and pronoun warfare, and the list goes on and on. So it's happening in France, maybe the canary in the coal mine, as other Western nations continue to devolve into madness. We'll continue to cover, my friends.